Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of the OBRY Hours. I am your host, John MacTemus, and I guess if I had to put a title on this episode, it would probably be, I Don't Want It Back. And it was precipitated by a video that was posted on the BitChute channel, Wardo Rants. And I'm going to play at least a part of that video so you can hear where I was coming from. After I was done watching this video, I wrote a comment. I haven't even checked to see what the replies were, mostly because I don't care. And then after I play this audio to you, I will explain to you my big issue with what this guy is saying. So here it is.
Anybody who's in the restaurant industry for just a minute? I'm part of that industry. I'm part of the restaurant industry too, for any of you that are in it. And I just want to say one thing that's very important. Everybody in here has to understand. Probably every other business, guys. Probably everybody else with any business. We've been used to living very well, like Marie said. Very free, enjoyed our lives. Got to stop thinking like a victim criminal mentality. As the victim, I'll just do whatever the criminal tells me to do. They'll let me go when I'm done. They don't want to let us go. They want complete freaking control of us. They don't want us going back to normality. So this is the time we got to stand up. Every freaking business has got to stand up and put these sons of bitches down. Amen. Because if we don't, they're taking us out. That's right. I'm 60 freaking years old. I've lived all my life as an American. That's right. And Robbie's right. This isn't about Democrat or Republican. This is about American. That's right. And I am not ready to give my country up to these people so that they can ruin my life, everybody's life in here. We got to stop them. Yeah. We got to grow this group. Like Marie said, here, state, country, global. We got to really do this. This is the time to be serious. If we're not serious now, and it ain't going to take them long, you're looking at 6-8 months. This coming summer could be an absolute freaking disaster for freedom, for patriots, for this country. Right. We got to do this now. Every day has to be serious. Forget about looking forward to next Christmas with your family, next Thanksgiving with your family. It ain't going to happen if we don't stop them now, this year. Here. So that's it. Just keep going. Take this serious. Take this freaking serious. I want to finish my life owning my business. I said to Kelly this morning, all I want's my life back. I'm not looking for fame. I'm not looking for fortune. I want to mow my lawn on a sunny Saturday morning, again like I used to, and not worry about who the hell's coming to try to bomb my house, take it from me, and ruin my life. We gotta keep together. We gotta grow. Get the word out there. I'm not giving up. So neither should anybody here. I don't think you will. Amen. That's it.
So that's the whole thing. Now, what would you suppose a guy like me would take issue with in that video? What I'm going to tell you is just an expanded version of what I said in the comments. I'm not even going to read the comments because I know what I said. This guy and the room full of people he was in a very large area, like a warehouse, big space. And a bunch of people standing around. So him and all these people. What I take issue with, and why my comment was scathing. He wants his life back. He is 60 years old, and he has lived his life as an American for 60 years. So that would have been starting in about 1960 to today. And he talked about criminal victim mentality. being patriot and all that. And it's stuff that I hear all the time. Almost no matter where you turn, right? You hear that. Patriot. I just want my life. I just want to go back. There's all these people now that I hear. I keep hearing. There's all these people. They're waking up and they're not happy with the way things are going now. And they just want their life back. Well, I don't care if he gets his life back. I don't care. In fact, I don't want him to have his old life back. I don't want him to have his old life back. I don't want my old life back. Because if you go back, let's go back a year from today. Are you telling me that if enough people to make it matter rose up in unison, they said, we're sick of this corona crap and we want our lives back. And somehow they, the powers that be conceded and they said, well, we're not going to gain ground here, not now. Gosh, I guess we'll let them go back to how things were for them a year ago. That, well, first off, that's really going to matter. You know how fast we tend to forget? Do you know how quickly or how long it takes for us to just get comfortable again in our in the crap lives that we have come to expect and accept? We forget so quickly what these supposedly our representatives have pulled on us. And this is them across the board, folks. Across the board. Do you know how quickly everybody would just forget? And then they'd be pulling something else in a year. 2 years. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because they don't stop. What they're about and what they intend to do, and that's not going to stop. They're not going to stop. It's not in them. It's not in their nature. So I just have to preface everything else I say with that. That is a ridiculous, childish mentality to think you can go back and have what you had a year ago. Or if you want to be more nostalgic, you want what you had 10 years ago. Well, you can't have it. It's not going to happen. They're not going to allow it. The most they would allow is for everybody to have a kind of a temporary reprieve, just long enough to forget all of this and everything they tried pulling. And then they'll just regroup. They'll do it again. And they'll learn this time. They'll learn. And they'll do it better next time, you goof. Stop thinking like that. That's infantile. It's childish. First off, that's just off the top. Furthermore, I don't care if they didn't regroup and for some inexplicable, amazing reason, we managed to go back a year ago, 10 years ago, and have what we had then for another 50 or 100 years. I don't want that either. I don't care if we went back 50, 100 years. I don't care if we went back to the Constitution. I don't want it. I'm not standing shoulder to shoulder with patriots who want their Constitution. They want to mow their lawns on Saturday morning. They want back their world in which exists what? Freedom? What kind of freedom? Freedom to make and distribute pornography. Freedom for anyone to blaspheme our God in any way they choose. Freedom for everyone to practice any religion they want. Freedom for international bankers to scheme and contrive all manner of scams and seedy, slick contracts to keep everyone, and that's your neighbor, and that's your children, and your loved ones, enslaved. That's what you want to go back to, huh? And I don't want to hear this crap about the gold standard. We can go back to the gold standard because the people who own the majority of the gold, they set market prices anyways. That's just another rabbi trail to go down. And I'm not even going to get caught up in that. I don't want your Constitution. Because anything that is short of, or that is to the left or the right of Yahweh's law, I don't want. And you can't show me a system. I don't care how nostalgic you want to be and say how good those days must have been. Because when you go back far enough, the people who are in control of everything, and it's not just the Ashkenazim, and that's the other way I think we need to grow up a little bit. The people who are in control, and there are multiple different people groups that are working in conjunction. There happens to be one who is now at the top of the heap. But there are a number of people groups who are not the Israelites. They know they're not. They know who we are. And they are working always to keep us enslaved. To call our numbers as much as they see fit. Perhaps to go all the way. I don't know. I don't know if that would be an ultimate plan of theirs, to go all the way with that or not. But there are a number of people groups. They are the peoples from the old world who never entirely died out. They were never supposed to. We know from Daniel 7 that Yahweh would keep those peoples and kingdoms around for a while until the whole system was brought down. So there's no way that you can go back far enough and prove that things were so good. Well, things were so good. Even the people who are anti-constitutionalists and they're pro the Articles of Confederation, things were so good under that. No, I doubt it. I doubt for the Israelites, things were not good. Because things have not been good for the Israelites for as long as I can look into and see what is even relatively trustworthy history. They may have been good for the same kinds of people that today they're really, really good for, because they've had a long time to extract from us and from everybody, even using us to extract the energy and the labor and what goodness there is in all manner of people. So there's no way for anybody to prove to me that things were so good for the Israelites, even between the time of the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, which of course was drafted in a series of secret meetings, which a number of people had serious issue with the Constitution. And the situation, the atmosphere, and the intent under which it was drafted. But look, let's consider for one thing. Well, there's all those people. We want to go back to the Constitution. Before I get in a bit to what is wrong with it, besides the fact that for those people who they just clamor, they want to be back under the Constitution, a lot of them don't seem to realize that a lot of their problems that they have today are precisely because they're under the Constitution. You see, in the Constitution, everyone is given the freedom to contract. You and most of the people you know are drowning in debt servitude and living in a land which has been reduced to an utter toilet, in large part due to the Constitution and the right to contract, you see. Because we were given enough freedom by law in the contract to hang ourselves. So, look, we'll just say, we'll just take this from an American perspective. But most constitutions in most of the countries that contain Israelites around the world, they're all pretty similar. They're all pretty similar. And that should be one of the first clues that we're looking at yet another component of a very universal plot against the Israel of the Bible. But in the United States, there are basically about 4 main documents that are considered law that you're supposed to be able to use as law in a court of law. Those documents are the Magna Carta, the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. Now, I have the Constitution of the United States up, and I'm going to read a bit of it, and I'm going to tell you what the issues that I have are with it. So here we go. The preamble. We, the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So what's the problem already? Besides, for instance, take those pamphlets that Spooner wrote, and I'm not a huge fan of Spooner, but his arguments about who exactly we the people are or were in the Constitution and how much that applies to anyone else, okay, that's one thing. But let's just say, all right, let's just say everybody who is qualified, who this pertains to and agrees to it, we'll just leave it there. Still, what's the problem? The problem is right there at the very end, in order for this and that, and in order to do this and to do that, we do ordain and establish what? The laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh as given to our fathers for a perpetual agreement that we would keep and be blessed. We do ordain and establish His laws. It doesn't say that. It says it ordains and establishes this Constitution. And then what follows is a number of articles and clauses. Man's law. But what I keep hearing, I hear this all the time. People say, but the Constitution is based on Bible law. But Braveheart was based on the life of William Wallace. And it's full of error. It's full of lies, actually. Campbell's Chicken Soup is based on home cooking. Right? The Flintstones was based on the Jurassic era. Doesn't matter if they claim it was based on it because they can pick out some good points in there. It either is or it isn't. If it veers to the right or to the left, it is not. You see, and it follows immediately with the statement, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. And then they go all into their points on what the House of Representatives should be comprised of, and the Senate should be comprised of, and so on and so forth. And we look at this as if it were something good. We look at them, all they could have is, all that can be used as money, as gold and silver, and Congress shall have the power to so-and-so and such as good. Well, you can have 100 pounds of your gold. That's just fine. But while our enemies own the lion's share of it, they will decide what it's worth. And you and I, as long as we are clamoring to have our Constitution back, we will never be blessed by our God, our Alay or Alayim. We're not going to find that magnificent gold reserve or be able to keep it, which will offset the balances. We're not going to get out from under them with any of these methods. Not with a constitution. You can go back and have your constitution, and you're just going to be back in a position. You can go all the way back, and you can have your constitution, and you can start right from there and work forward, and you are gonna still be under the boot of the same people that has had our people under its boot for so long. Because, see, they know and they've learned. They've learned that we, for one thing, are a very blessed people. And they know why. Maybe not all of them. Maybe not all of them at the lower levels. No one understands why. But the ones up at the top, they know why. They understand why. And this world that they occupy and that we occupy together, this world, they know that as long as we are lawless in accordance with Yahweh's law, forget the Constitution, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, I don't care. You can have them all. What they care about is that we are lawless according to his law. And you know, the thing is, people just, they go on and on about, for instance, the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights. Amendment number 1, let's say. Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Well, that sounds great, right? That's really great. That's fantastic. And, you know, I've been amongst the people, even in the last few years, to point this out to people and show them how these so-called rights are not being given to us. But, you know, you have to learn, and then you should grow when you learn, because they're learning, our enemies are learning and growing, and at a pace far more rapid than us. They've been learning about us and applying what they know about us for a really long time. And as long as they can keep us believing in the goodness, the efficacy of man's law, which these documents are man's law, they can keep governing over us. They can keep taking our blessings from us. That's what they do. All of our good produce, they take. Our blessings, they take. They take it through a very sophisticated scheme of funny money and contracts, and through social conditioning. But they take it because they know us. And they know as long as they can keep us at people who are lawless, that don't adhere solely to Yahweh's law, the Elohim, or God of Yisrael, our father Yisrael, they can keep us enslaved. And they've done so, not just in recent times, but for a long, long time. This is precisely what he prophesied through his prophets. And I would just ask everybody, are you okay then with going back to the state status and form of slavery we had 10 years ago, 200 years ago, to put our children and our grandchildren under that boot of slavery? Because these various peoples working in tandem, they want just that. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody out there who, who believes that the Constitution, other documents are good documents, are like per se shills or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is a way that seems good to a man. But if it's not the ways of Yahweh, if it's not his laws, his statutes, and his judgments, then it's not his laws, his statutes, and his judgments. If we aren't keeping those things, we are breaking those things. The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights, what does it say? It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But the thing is, Yahweh's law, first off, is not religion. Secondly, he makes it very clear in his law that in his land and among his people, and this is right there in his 10 Commandments, he says, you will have no lesser God before me. Now you check that word that he uses, alei, A-L-E-Y, and you do a nice exhaustive search on that, and what you'll find is, you'll see it in the form of ale, alei, aleim. And you'll see that many times when you see that word come up, it is actually talking about men. You will not have any lesser. Let's just call it, we could call it powers. You see, some people who purport to teach Paleo-Hebrew, they would say that a word like al or aliyim means sort of powers. I, on the other hand, think that it actually relays, in a sense, a positive direction towards. And yes, it can either be used as a title for Yahweh, or it can be used as a title or a description of anything or anyone that we simply obey. And then we think that Article 1 or Amendment 1 of the Bill of Rights, that Congress should make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof, is a good and righteous act. And it is nothing of the sort. In fact, under his law, we will prohibit anyone, Commandment 2, worshiping anything or anyone that is not him. And what is that worship? That worship is obedience to. If you obey any document, any law that is made in contradistinction or contradiction to his, then you are worshiping and obeying that lesser God. That's exactly what you're doing. So if all of these documents were in force, by the 1780s. And, I could also open up a document that had the Articles of Confederation. I've read them. There are points to them that are different concerning really just the power of states as in contrast to the power of the federal government. So, what do you want? If you read your state constitutions, they're really just like the federal Constitution of the United States, with some differences. Very few. So which do you want? You want the state ruling over you with a body of laws that are not our God's body of laws? Or do you want a federal government who rules over you with a body of laws that are not our God's body of laws? Take your pick. You're free to choose if you really believe that. You see, the only way that we're going to achieve freedom is by keeping his laws. So, I don't look at going back before we had another central bank in the form of the Federal Reserve as being free. We still weren't free. Anyone can look at the social dynamics and conditions of our people. Before 1913, before the 1860s, before the 1770s and 80s, and if you pay attention and you got a sharp eye, you will see that it hasn't really changed. I guess the only way that it's changed is they've been very successful in convincing us that because a lot of us, we are finding out about how prolific white slavery was just a few centuries ago. Overt white slavery, and we don't realize that we're still slaves. And secondly, this idea of white. I'm absolutely sick of that word, and I'm sick of the idea. I hate hearing people say white. Now, if people say the white race, okay, I don't take too much of an issue with that, because that could really just be a synonym for the Noahites or the Adamites. And I haven't entirely decided if Adam only means so-called white. Because there is Adam created in Genesis 1, who there is a distinction between that and Genesis 2. So I'm not completely convinced. I just don't know exactly what I think yet, but I don't like that term white. The reason is we've been so fooled. We've been so fooled by this idea of whites. Even the people who distinguish, let's say, the difference between the Jew, and they're always thinking, when they are supposedly making this distinction, they're always thinking of the Ashkenazim. And what they're not considering is that before the Ashkenazim took down Britain and the aristocracy, they pulled that dynasty up by its roots in England, then in France, then Russia. 3 countries, of course, that came against Germany twice. Now, I'm not saying that the people of England are who we're talking about, necessarily the people of France, because there's different people in there. You have to understand there's a huge distinction oftentimes between the people of a country and the people that are running things. So anyways, when that little horn pulled up those other 3 by their roots, and they began to flourish as much as they really could, because if they could, they would be flourishing tremendously. They're still not like we have. They simply haven't been blessed in that way. Before that happened, and they became a very dominant tribe, the other people who were known as Jews, we'll say the Sephardim, and then there was other various people who were known as Jews too. If you go back and you look for woodcuts, sketches, paintings, whatever images you can find of these people, they neither looked like Ashkenazim, nor did they look all that much different than us. Than the Germanics and the Celts, the Anglos, all the house of Israel. They didn't look that much different. And the reason that they didn't look that much different is because these are people who came from the seed of Noah, Ham, Shem, Japheth. These are people that were very racially similar to us. Did some have a certain amount of miscegenation? I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, sure, maybe. But, being, living as distinct nations, from the time that we were separated and distinguished as nations, and the only people in the Bible that are called nations are those that comprise the descendants of Noah and his 3 sons. No one else is considered nations. But from the time that we were separated into various nations, there was certainly a concentration and a replication of certain dominant genetic features, which would make some so-called whites certainly have distinct looks from other so-called whites, which would help to explain why a lot of the earlier people, before that little horn took the power that it did, a lot of people, not all, that were known as Jews, they did not look like the Ashkenazim because they weren't. And you could call them Sephardim, but I don't know that all of them were. They were simply a people that really didn't look that much different than us. So the whole idea of white is a sham. Not necessarily used by a lot of the people who use it as a way to deceive you, but it's been used on us to deceive us. Because just the fact is that, for instance, those nations that would comprise that great beast empire, which we can clearly see in history. If you go to Revelation 13, there's this great beast empire, with the 7 heads and the 10 horns, and it's the one that it seems like a real mix-up blend of former beasts that we saw in Daniel 7. It had the feet of a bear, and the body of a leopard, the mouth of a lion, that kind of thing. And you'll hear people say things like, it would have had the foundation of Persia, because they think that one empire, the second one, was Persia. It wasn't called Persia, it was called Paris. The feet thereof, and they would say that it had the body like Greece, and they'll try to explain to you why the body of it would have been like Greece, but that second empire is never called Greece, it's Yun, like John. Or Ian, maybe Ivan. This is the various pronunciations that Yun would be. That's the name. That's the name of Japheth's son, or grandson. And he also fathered Tarshish. And I have a great idea of who that is. But, and it would have, like, I think it said the mouth and head of a lion. And of course that's Babel. The Kashidim. All of these people were racially similar to us. Listen, I'm not trying to be insulting to, let's say if I had an Arab listener or Indian listeners or anything like that. It is not my desire or my purpose to insult or put down anyone, any people type. It really isn't. But it's silly to imagine empires coming upon and destroying our own that were anything but Noahites. And the way that they make Persia out to be, and Babel, is as non-Noahites or non-whites. It is very rare that a race of people who are not Noahites, Adamites, whites stand any kind of a chance. And they don't make their own empires. They are given them by our kind. They are established in their countries by our kind. Here's the beauty about other peoples, and this is why I don't seek to put them down. This is certainly not me trying to put other people types down. I think we need to understand who we are. And the thing about other people types, and especially if you get over to East Asia, this is a really great example. And the thing is, this may apply really well all over the place. I don't know, because the thing is, this hasn't worked as well amongst African populations as in Asia. And I don't know that it's worked as well in, say, South American, Central American populations. But in Asia, one of the beauties of East Asian people is they're like a time capsule. They are like a time capsule. They're not like Noahites. Noahites tend to always be moving, changing, evolving. You give us a language and you leave us to our own devices, and we're going to distort it. Even we may not even mean to. You can see that in Judges 12. They were just distorting the phonetics, but they had. So the big difference, and not just distortion, like it, is a negative thing, but we're deviants. Noahites deviate. The trouble in the world today, it's not coming from blacks, it's not coming from Asians, it's coming from Noahites. Now, some people might cry, well, that's the Ashkenazim, and they're not Noahites, and they're, the sons of Cain and all of that stuff. Yeah, but at the same time, they have a certain amount, pretty decent amount, of Adamite blood. We're the ones. When if you could just take all of the Adamites, Noahites all together, that are responsible for what's going on today. The Israelites responsible because we are not serving our purpose and taking our rightful place. And we have to keep the law in order to overcome our enemies and make this world a far better place. And our enemies, because they're warring on us, and they're using us and all kinds of other peoples to subjugate the whole world. But the beautiful thing is, you can see over very, 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 very long periods of time, these various non-white peoples will preserve just about anything. They'll preserve a language, they'll preserve a tradition, and I mean hard. They hang on to those things. You get them at a certain state of knowing and understanding and practicing any given thing, and they will preserve it. Just like steady state preserve it. Which is why they would be able to appear as though they were something that they weren't necessarily. If they had architecture and culture and language or cuisine, whatever it may be, given to them 1,000 years ago, and then the people, the Noahites, the Adamites that gave that to them, either moved on or died out naturally, or let's just say those non-white peoples killed them. So I'm sure that happens. Then they would actually continue in that state of what they were given, what they were taught. Pretty much forever. They are preservative. And that's why they often appear to have empire, or to have had empires. When what is really most likely the case, when you look at the intelligence in even those old relics of building or shipmaking or infrastructure, engineering in these places, it is quite distinctly Noahite, Adamite. They just don't simply offer a real threat. This is why I think it's incumbent on us to get this idea out of our head. This silly idea about Persia or Babel, that they were Arab empires. This isn't to suggest that the people that we call Arabs, and I think incorrectly so, unless they name them that based on the ARB of OBRY, the crouching in wait, if they got that title because they attacked a lot of travelers, which, if you read on people who were exploring the Middle East 100, 200 years ago, that was always constant threat from these people. So maybe that's how they got their name, actually. It wouldn't have been from the OBRY. People tend to put the two together because in the Bible, especially in the like in the New Testament, you'll see things like Arabia. That's just the bad transliteration of the OBRY. The OBRY is best understood as the prairie lands, Great Plains. ORB, or ORBE for OBRY. Not ARB, Arab, to lie in wait. As in getting ready to attack travelers by. And that's probably far more likely how the Arab got their name from us, anyways. I'm sure that's probably not what they called themselves however long ago we're talking about. That we came across them as the indigeni of that area, because I'm sure they were the indigeni of that area, always have been. Because it makes sense. They were made to live in that land. They're perfectly suited for that dry, dusty land in which they live. I know it's not all dry and dusty. There's plenty of oases. But in general, that land, they were created in that land. Just like the blacks in Africa. The Indians in India, the Orientals in the Orient, the Inuits in the Northern Americas, and even the American Indian. Just because those various indigeni were probably made in those places and in those areas doesn't mean we weren't made there also. But I guess that's another story and another issue. The whole point is that we really need to get this idea out of our heads that those nations that would make up that great horrible beast that we see in Revelation 13, and also make up the leadership of that second beast that we would see in 13. That second beast being the one beast out of all of them that rises up out of the land instead of the sea, and that's important. It's really important, in fact. Because when in the land is talked about in the Bible, it's specifically talking about the land that we came from, that our fathers came from, the land. I know that there is, there's the symbolism, of the sea and waters and things like that. I understand that, but we're talking about the land. In the land. But these beasts, they're made up of essentially principalities that came from those kingdoms. Those kingdoms being populated and run, comprised of people that were racially, ethnically, very much like us. Just like all of these people that are running everything now. It's one of the reasons why so many people look at a lot of the people that are in these high positions. They can't figure it out because there's nothing about them that strikes them as an Ashkenazim. But eventually they just come to this point where they say they're a Jew. They don't understand that the people in these positions, they're not just the Ashkenazim. There's a number of nations, of people types that are running things. There are various nations, people types that live amongst us, Israelites, in various countries. And I mean, maybe that was really the purpose and intent of coming up with this whole generalization of white. I know that in America, we were using that generalization, designation, in a really deceptive way as early as at least the early 1800s on various census reports. They would just say whites. Now, the funny thing is, let's say these are census reports on slave owners, and they recorded, all of these various slave owners that were white. And then what they could do is they could turn around and they could try to put it on us, the Israelites, who were mostly comprised of, English yeomen, Rhineland German, Scottish and Irish Celts, Welsh, some Scandinavians. I don't know how many of the Scandinavian peoples are our kin. I'm still trying to figure out who is who. Okay. And I'm trying to do that by fruit, by the signs. We're looking for signs. I know I can see that in the Irish and Scottish Celts, the Welsh, the English Common, the Germanics. Really, really clear. I'm just looking for it in other peoples, If I don't see the signs, I don't see our enemies making slaves of them and attacking them and also, then I'm not so sure. Like I know that they have, they've waged war on the Boer. And I don't know how much they waged war on the common Dutch before that. I know most Dutch people I know, they don't come from the same background as Germanics, Celts, Anglo-Yeoman, but we'll see. I always have to look for the signs. So, there you go. Why shouldn't we want to go back to a year ago, to 10 years ago? Because it's just slavery. And they're just going to give us more in a different way. They're going to learn. They're going to figure out how to do it better and harder and more effectively. And they're going to come back and they're going to really do it this next time. It won't be COVID-19 next time. It'll be something even slicker, smarter. They'll take everything they've learned about social conditioning, how they can do it, how they can play on people's fears, how they can play on people's greed and their stupidity, Oh, the government's going to give you free money. It's going to be okay. They're going to give you free money. People are so stupid. They don't even realize there's no free money, you idiot. I knew people that were like, they're dancing up and down. They're going to give us free money. It's going to make everything okay. I said, they're not giving you free money. There's no free money. What the hell are you talking about? There's no free money. Whatever they're giving you, that's a debt. All they're giving you, whether they print it up or whether it's just an entry in their ledger, whatever you think they're giving you, that's just debt that they're giving to your great-great-grandchildren, you dope. You idiot. You child. You infant. And they know that. They know that. They know what we're like. They know how dumb we are, for the most part. And so if by some chance we manage to fight them off, and this guy gets to go back to mowing his lawn on a Saturday morning, paying on his damn mortgage, paying on his truck, paying on all his bullshit he got through the credit company, teaching his children that that's the right thing to do. Well, you know, you went into debt, you need to pay it. Letting his children break the laws of Yahweh and thinking there's not going to be any consequences, that things aren't going to get worse. They're going to get worse, folks. They're going to get worse. Doesn't matter if you go back a year or two ago, 10 years, 100 years ago, it doesn't matter. They're going to come back because it's a war. It's a war. And you don't get a reprieve. The only reprieves you get is like the debt money you get. You think you're getting a reprieve, and all you're really doing is they're just letting you sit on your fat, lazy ass. And letting your children get fat, lazy, and stupid so that they can kill them easier. You idiot. You buffoon. Now, a lot of people think I'm just being harsh, like I'm just mad at the world. I'm just an angry guy. Well, sometimes I'm angry. Yeah, sometimes I get really angry. And you know, given the condition of the world, the way our people are, how selfish they are, how infantile they are, or tend to be, well, that's enough to make somebody angry. A lot. Like almost all the time. Well, maybe they would say, well, where's your faith? Where's my faith? What does that have to do with me being disgusted at the world I see and the people and their actions in it? What does my faith have to do with that? In fact, if anybody cares to, they can go back to the book of Ezekiel. And it is actually within the first few chapters. I'm just so you know, I wouldn't just tell you go do that, then I couldn't give you the reference. So I'm going to check it real quick. Here we go. I think this is the right one. I don't know. I'll tell you about it as I go looking for this. He had a vision. Here we go. Yeah, it's chapter 9. He's having it's like a series of visions. And I guess I might have to go back to chapter 8 real quick. Let's see. Yeah, in chapter 8, he's sitting before the elders of Judah. Okay. So starting in chapter 9, it says, he cried also in my ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lies towards the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. That's a weapon to kill people with. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in, and they stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house, and he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And Yahweh said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in my hearing, go ye after him through the city, and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have you pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. I want you to start at my sanctuary, with those people inhabiting my sanctuary that do not sigh and cry over evil. The people who don't complain about it even. You see, that's one thing. If you got people that are just actively committing these evil deeds. So you got them, right? But then here's the real bastards. The real bastards are the ones who claim to be good, who aren't even complaining about all the evil around them. They're not even complaining about it. It's not like they're going out there doing something real about it or anything like that. They're not even putting together posters. They won't even put out a post on Facebook. God forbid somebody might call them some bad name. Somebody might think they weren't loving. They don't even complain. They don't even complain about it. You get it? This is why I spend a lot of my time frustrated, pretty angry, pretty damned angry, and disgusted. Disgusted with people who claim to be good. Churchies. Good old churchies. Good old churchies who pay no attention to the laws of Yahweh. And they worship the lesser gods, who tell them that you have to look at everybody the same, you got to treat everybody the same. You need to take out bank loans and elect politicians who will get your children and grandchildren worse and worse and worse debt. You need to let your daughter date a black guy. Those people, the churchies, who say they're good. Oh no, if you ask them, they'll say, "Oh no, I don't think I'm good. I just live day by day from the good grace that the good Lord gives me." They think they're good, though. You can tell by the way they act. They think they're good people. No, just, oh boy, am I a product of grace, Oh man. Bullshit. Bullshit. You think you're good. You think you're a good person. You believe in the Constitution. You think things would be great if it just wasn't for this. Oh man, these rising interest rates. Oh, these liberal politicians. Man, things would be just great if it weren't for these people. They're ruining it. That's what's wrong. Things would be great if it weren't for the damn liberals. Or this damn inflation. Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. We go down to Florida half the year. We're on a fixed income. We have to, we have to plan out all of our meals that we eat out while we're down there, and this inflation keeps up. But everything would be fine if it weren't for that. It was bad people that gave you that inflation. And I look at these kind of attitudes and I see red. My lips, they're tight right now. My teeth are clenched. I see red. Because they don't even complain about the evil around them. Okay, so look, today is a new day. Everything I've recorded up to this point was recorded a couple of days ago. Today it is the first day of January, and I guess it's 2021, isn't it? That's what the calendar says in the lower left-hand corner of my computer screen. It must be true. So, yeah, everything I recorded before this was done in one take, pretty much. One relatively uninterrupted take. About 2 days ago, I think. Maybe 3. I really need to date them as I go. I don't think I dated that first one. But anyways. So I've had a few days to think more about a lot of the stuff that I was saying on that previous. And about going back. And how I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to something that makes you comfortable. I don't want to go back to a system that you love. If it's not the law, the statutes, and the judgments of Aliyim, God, Yahweh. Because what's the point? Then what's the point? A lot of people in identity, and most specifically in the CI branch, of identity, CI, Christian identity, they do, they do talk at length about the Jews. I do at times. Especially, specifically, if we're talking about things that we should know and understand about people. Who's doing what? The fact that not everybody is like us. They're not. And this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to get the idea of white people as a race. If you can put all of the people with this similar sort of genetic coding, together into a race and call it a race, and you call it white, why it's even a very bad idea to classify us all together in the sense of all of us who would fall into that category as being the same or similar. It's just not true. Because, there are differences. There's marked, distinct differences between, say, a northern Western European and a Jew. And, whether we're talking about Ashkenazi or Sephardim or Mizrahi or Yemeni, there's a lot of different kinds, guys. There's differences. There are marked differences. Now, in the case of like Mizrahi or Yemeni, the differences are broad enough to be very distinct very distinct racial differences. But in many cases, you look at someone who is classified or self-identified as a Jew, and the differences racially, just in, genetic makeup, they're not huge. And they would oftentimes qualify more as white than any other racial category you could put them in. As I pointed out earlier, all of our greatest enemies have been of our own race. We have to look at what nations and what peoples are of a certain distinct makeup in our modern times. And we really have to, I think, be conscious of dividing those people, the Israelites, from all the other Adamites and Noahites. We can't just keep looking at it as a white people thing, as though we were all just so similar and we should function in some kind of a unity. That is a terrible, bad way of looking at it. And unfortunately, most of the people out there that claim to be advocates for quote-unquote whites, and here's where the sophistry comes in, and not all of these people are consciously practicing sophistry, but this is where it comes in, is that when they say whites, the people that they're speaking to more times than not are the Northern and Western European peoples who have the signs of Israel. That's who they are speaking to when they use that term. But we hear it and not realizing who we are, how distinct we are, and how much those peoples who are racially quite similar to us have been our great adversaries in the past. And sometimes you don't have to go back that far to really see it. To demonstrate this, I just have a hard time listening to even some people who I don't think are shills or agents or whatever, who I think are pretty genuine. And have them talk about whites like as in there's some kind of a unity, excuse me, between us. And that the only disunity, outside or alien, is, say the Jew Or, depending on what situation you get in, they may say, the black, they may say the mestizo, they may say all kinds of other people, but then putting all whites together as if we are so similar, or have the same interests, or the same behaviors, or the same soul. It's just not true. It is demonstrably not true. And we can look at this in our own time. So go back to World War I and World War II and look at the dynamics between the Germans, not necessarily the wars being fought and the soldiers brought against Germany, because, for instance, the soldiers brought against Germany from England, many of those were people of Saxon stock. So they came from the same bloodlines. When America got in the war, many of the people sent against Germany were of direct German descent. Saxon, Prussian, Bavarian, Rhinelanders, these were direct descendants. We simply spoke a different language. That was the case with many of the English soldiers that came against Germany. If many soldiers were drafted and put into the war from Russia in the area of Ukraine, or other outlying areas that were brought in from the Germanic peoples by, say, Catherine the Great, then again, you had Germans coming against Germans. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the nations that brainwashed or coerced or lied to their peoples to bring them against Germany to fight against them in this war. I'm talking about the direct social dynamics happening between Germanics and other peoples around them in Europe that had to be dealt with, especially in the interim between World War I and World War II. The case of the Czechs and the Germans, and how Hitler worked to extricate the Germanics from a people who were very aggressive and often violent and oppressive to Germanics. So this happened, in the Sudetenland. This is why, and the pretext for him taking back lands, because they had been traditionally occupied by Germanics for a very, 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 very long time. A long enough time for them to have a legitimate claim on those lands. You couldn't just say, well, they were strangers in a strange land, and why should he take that land? You see, the people being bonded to the land for many, 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 many generations. That was the cause, then the pretext and the justification in his mind. And now the same thing happened with Poland. And it happened with Poland. Before the war, there was a history between Germany and the Polish of aggression from the Polish on the German. In fact, this is why Germany did what they did concerning Poland, which gave them, because of the agreements that Churchill and Britain had made with Poland, and they made them specifically with Poland because, for one thing, I believe they knew that peace couldn't last with Poland and Germany, because peace never did last with Poland and Germany. And when you see the horrific and savage and brutal, animalistic, in many cases, treatment of Germans and German women, not by Russians, not by Jews, but by Poles after the war, by Poles after the war. then it's not difficult. It shouldn't be difficult for one to rationally understand that white is not a united front. People that are out there that talk like they are so rational, that we need to look at things rationally, turn right around and say the most irrational things. Like that in some way that so-called whites are all generally the same, and that we would all work with same similar interests, that we have similar mindsets. Hogwash. That is absolutely abominable, because it's just so unnatural to say or think something like that. And this is why people have to understand that all of the peoples that were living around us when we had a great empire in Canaan land, not Palestine, were all very racially similar to us. Making an example, now I'm not going to accuse all the French of being non-Israelite, but what I'm trying to tell you is there are a great many non-Israelite peoples blended with the Israelite peoples in Europe, in the U.S., and now in any of our countries. And it's really tough, because we have been conditioned, just like these so-called white nationalists and so-called white advocates, and even people in identity are doing this also, to regard white as somehow the same. This is a recipe for disaster, because we don't know who is who. This is why, if you're trying to make an argument to somebody about how different, and you're going to use the term whites, are from blacks or Hispanics or Jews or anybody else, and all that person has to do, while you're trying to make this argument, all that person has to do is think in their head of a half dozen people off the top of their head that are total white trash, that are rotten people through and through, man, top to bottom. And you've lost your argument. You have to stop arguing like that. Are white people different than people of other races? Certainly in certain physical ways they are. Mentally, spiritually, are all so-called white people different than those of other races? Well, that's the question. That's the question. What's the answer? I don't know. Because I know people that racially qualify in the same category as those people that I can clearly see are the Israelites of the Bible today, through their fruits, through what we've been made into as a people, been remade into as a people, because we were quite different back then than we are today as a people. And we are continuing to be a different kind of person. One might say a new creation. We are distinct not only from other people and other white people. We are distinct from what we once were. That's so very important to understand. If you don't acknowledge that, you take the glorious work that our God, our Elohim, did away from him. So if that's true, and he has taken a certain group of people within a larger racial category and has and is making them different than they were, making them such a distinctly different people, not only does he need to be glorified in doing that, which means that we have to recognize what we were and recognize what we are. We also need to recognize the sharp distinctions between the Israelites and other so-called whites. And we have to stop making straw man arguments about the distinction of whites, because we're grouping the Israelites with all the other Japhethites and Shemites and Hamites. And whatever Kenim or Kenites survived, or whatever other Adamites there may have been in existence who were not dwelling in this land in which the Great Flood occurred. There's a very demonstrable difference between Israelites and other people. You know it because you've experienced it. And if you haven't experienced it, you're not interacting with enough people of your own race who are different than you. Because I have. You know, I labored under the false assumption that, whites in general were similar. Other than certain specific genetic markers, we're not. We are in ways. And, when I say genetic markers, I do mean even mentally, to a degree. But even that's not the same. If we want to look at, let's say, all of the things that make whites distinct and great that these so-called pro-white people talk about a lot. What they're always using as a basis of this praise of whites in contradistinction to other races, but they are more oftentimes than not pointing to the apparent accomplishments and blessings of the people who are demonstrably the Israelites. And they're just applying that to all whites. Erroneously. Innovations, great goodness that has been done, the great blessings that have been received, and of course, especially the atheists will oftentimes erroneously attribute that to simply our characteristics. And they're wrong. It's not just the characteristics of being white that makes a Germanic or Anglo or Swedish or Irish farmer in the U.S., the land of Amory, one of the finest pieces of land on the earth, if not the finest. Or in South Africa, or in Australia, wherever a certain people go and farm, they consistently reap far greater rewards than any other people farming anywhere else, unless they're under a curse because of their lawless behavior. But it was clear to people many decades ago that you could have the Northern and Western Europeans farm the same land as the Rus would farm. So there's white and white. And the Russians are just as white as the Northern and Western Europeans. And they consistently would not get the same amount of produce as we would from the same bit of land, same equipment, same procedures. You can give them the same soil. So you have to distinguish the Israelites from the rest of the Noahites and Adamites. For one thing, we have to stop using the term whites. Furthermore, the Israelites cannot live in a nation founded under or operating under a constitution of men. The Israelites must live in a nation dedicated to keeping the laws of Yahweh, the laws agreed to by our forefathers. The laws which, if they are not kept, bring upon us all of the cursings of Deuteronomy 28. And I read them through in a presentation I did a few months ago. Pretty sure it was a presentation. I think it was, wasn't that one the last level? Where I talk about whose ultimate fault it is things are going on. You know, with as much as we talk about the misdeeds of the Jews, and it's, you know, in most cases it is true. It's not slanderous. But we need to understand that they're merely a tool. They're merely a tool being used by our Elohim God to judge us and to bring us into obedience to Him. So as long as we are lawless and we are a nation that is worshiping a constitution instead of keeping His law, they will always reign over us. All that they do will come to pass. All that we do will not. So this is why I don't want to go back like this guy wants to go back to a year ago. And I don't even know who he is, what he does. I don't know. I don't know him from Adam, you see. I don't know who and what he is anyways. I don't want anything but a nation keeping the laws of Yahweh. Now, yes, this nation needs to be comprised predominantly of my racial kinsmen, because my racial kinsmen are the people promised this great redemption. However, I don't know that I yet entirely agree with the idea that everybody else who is not our racial kinsman needs to be kicked out. I think plenty of people need to be kicked out. But they need to be subjected to the same laws that we are. We see that in Exodus 12. You shall have one law for the native-born Israelites and one law for the foreigner. Now, there are about 3 or 4 different words used and translated as foreigner. They are distinctly different words. And I have a hard time believing that every single one of those very distinctly different words and all the different contexts that they're used in throughout the early scriptures are all referring to those people who are racial kinsmen, as in the people with the genetic markers of Abram, Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob's 2 wives and 2 concubines, and the 12 sons and 1 daughter that he had. For one thing, I believe that we were meant to be managers. From the start, Adam, Genesis 2, was meant to be a manager. And I am leaning very strongly towards the concept that he was not put in the garden alone. This Gan Oden, it's probably a very bad idea to think of it specifically and only as a garden. Gan, this protected place. It's probably why the English call their backyard a garden, because it's usually enclosed and protected. A gun. That's what a gun is. But we've come to apply it more to like the little place with your plants and vegetables, your victory garden. Different. But the Gan Oden, to keep it, to manage it. And this is why, for instance, Abram, when they make these little movies on him, they would seem to show him like with a very small band of people sojourning, correct? Because they always have to keep everything scaled down when they're trying to sell you on the nonsense that it took place in Palestine, for one thing. But they always show him with this small band, which is impossible, because early in his time in Canaan, he had to rescue his nephew Lot. So he chose 400 plus men that he had trained, who had been born in his household and that he had trained for war. 400 young men able to make war. So this is not the older men, not able. 400 select men to go and defeat 4 kings who had taken off with his nephew and his goods and a lot of other people from a number of cities. This was a huge number of people, and Abraham had the luxury of selecting 400 men born in his house who he had trained for war. And these people, they're not mentioned, but we know that they are persons. They are souls. That's probably more accurate to call them Nepesh, souls that were with him. Souls that were even with Jacob when he ran from his brother Esau. Souls. This is why he was able to set up the pillar he did in Bethel or Betal. Why he was able to roll away the great stone when he met his cousin Rachel. And do you really think that all of those souls that were with him, that he took care of, then he watched over, and that did his work in keeping his flocks, his herds, in doing his planting and his harvesting, and all the general menial things? What do you think? You think they were all racially the same as him? What I'm getting at here is you take the model of South Africa and how well the Boers functioned with the various black Africans there before the Jews were stirring the pot pretty bad. And the only reason they were able to come in and stir the pot like that is because of all of those thick-headed Dutch Calvinists who were not behaving lawfully. They had become lawless more and more. And so, in order to oppress us, because Yahweh oppresses us when we are lawless, he sent in the Jew. It's why they are oppressing us in every one of our nations. Because we're lawless. And he doesn't care about our Constitution. He cares about his law. But, in South Africa, they had a very good system where the Boers would be the managers of farms, of mines, of projects, and the various black Africans would work for them. They would direct them. They would do the work. They would never attain to perhaps the wealth that the Boer would. But why should they? Now, if they had accomplished the same things, should they attain to the same wealth or benefit? Why not? I'm not against anyone of any race achieving anything. But the way that things naturally, obviously are, dictates that the natural order of things would be the Adamite, the Noahite, and for all those people that are involved, the best situation they could be in is with the Israelite, because of how blessed we've become. However, when the curses come upon us for not keeping the law, that's probably not the best place that these other peoples of other races would want to be. But in general, the most symbiont relationship is for us to manage them to work, not get welfare, to work. Them doing the simpler work, and us doing the more complex work, and it being harmonious. Them not even thinking about marrying our daughters, us not even thinking of taking theirs. But working in a symbiotic way where everyone has a far, far, far better existence. This is not like the perversion of the Jew from the Kabbalistic writings of the Jew, which encompasses just about everything. Kabbalistic writings encompasses the Talmud, it encompasses the Zohar, it encompasses the rabbinic writings. This is not like the Kabbalistic writings of the Jew. They think that everyone should be their slaves. This is not like that. But everyone should know their place. And if we, Israelites, would keep the law and would live in a nation or nations of Israelites keeping the laws of Yahweh that our forefathers agreed to with him, then everybody's life and this world would be a wonderful, wonderful place. So yeah, I'm not willing to go back to wherever that guy wants to go back to, because in my eyes, whatever it is that he wants to go back to, however wildly he wants to dream of nostalgic wonderfulness under the Constitution, under this, that, or the other. That is all shit. Because it's not the laws, statutes, and judgments specifically of Yahweh. You want a constitution? Let's take the scriptures and let's start working on them. Let's take all that we can know and that we can understand and reasonably apply and enforce and make that the constitution of our Israelite nations. That I am 100% behind and will give my everything for, my life for, because that is good. That's proper. That's what will net my descendants blessings. So he can keep his lawn mowing on his Saturday morning and his mortgage and his property taxes and his football games and his public education and his GMO foods and his mixed foods and his mixed seeds and his poisonous air and his usury and his banks and all of that garbage he can keep, because I won't lift a finger to help him get that back. So now, with all of that being said, let's just talk for a minute about the law. And let's just talk bare bones for a minute. Let's talk about the law, bare bones here, okay? And if we're going to talk about bare bones of the law, we need to go to Exodus 20. Because Exodus 20 is the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are not all of the law. The 10 Commandments are an excellent foundation of the law. They are foundational. Okay? Something you should realize also is that they are put in distinction as they are, because at Mount Horeb or Sinai, Yahweh began speaking these commandments to all the people. To all the people. These millions of people. His voice. He was going to speak these to all of the people. His voice thundered from the mountain as he spoke out his law. And by the time he had gotten 10 commandments out, the people were so disturbed. They were so disturbed and so upset and so horrified to hear the voice of Yahweh, Elohim, coming from this mountain with the great black smoke and darkness as it's described in our English versions, ascended on this mountain. They were so horrified and so fearful of the voice they heard. They begged Moses, they said, you go, and you commune with him. Let him give you the law, and you give us the law, because if he keeps speaking, we'll die. His voice was so utterly upsetting to these people's very being, their very physical being and life force, that they thought they would die if he kept speaking to them. I don't think they were being melodramatic. They were in fear of their lives because they were so wicked. They were in fear of their lives because his voice itself was so holy that their wicked frames threatened to fall apart. So that's why we have these first verses of Exodus 20, in distinction to the rest of the law. They are foundational. They are the beginnings of. They should never be viewed as they should never be viewed as a truncated, good enough form of the law. You see, if somebody says, well, our Constitution is great, and our Constitution is godly, and our Constitution comports with the laws of Yahweh, because, well, you can see the Ten Commandments in there. The Ten Commandments are not the encapsulation of the law. We know that even in the teachings of Yeshua, Jesus. Even when he was asked for the greatest laws, he didn't mention the Ten Commandments. For instance, he said he could encapsulate the law and the prophets by saying to love Yahweh your Elohim with all of your mind, with all of your strength, with all of your will, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's an encapsulation, but that's not an encapsulation of the Ten Commandments. There's far more to it than that. There are far more commandments, there are far more statutes, there are far more judgments than just the Ten Commandments. They are a great foundation. They are foundational, but they're not an encapsulation. Even when he is asked what the greatest commandment is, he doesn't quote from Exodus 20. He quotes from Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Ahad. He's one. Yahweh. He's one. Singular. He's one. Yahweh. He said that was the greatest commandment. And all of our church buildings, all across the world, populated mostly by his very people, Israel, break that first commandment. And they worship something that is three. He's one. And they use sophistry. And they twist things. Colorful language. Quantum physics. To try to somehow convince you that three whos is one what? They worship three. He is one. But again, he didn't quote the Ten Commandments. So the idea that they are somehow an encapsulation of the law is not so. They're foundational, but they are not summational. They are not sort of a summary. Yeshua gave us the summary of the law and the prophets. He gave us the summary. They are foundational. But out of this foundation, consider the first commandment of the foundation. It is, we'll start at Exodus 22. I am Yahweh, Eloheinu, your God. Well, it would actually, Alek, which have brought you from the land of Mitzrim and the house of servitude. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, this is really important. It's really important that we understand this correctly. And it has a heck of a lot to do with our ideas about the Constitution and obeying laws and what laws to obey and so on and so forth. We should understand this law, this one foundational law, is so important. Now, it is Exodus 20:3, and it reads in OBRY, La Iyeya Lak Alayim Aharim Ol Pani. Now, when you get to the word Aharim, something that's very important to understand is it comes from the root ahar. Ahar and its cognates all refer to something that is behind. If the Aharit Sea is being referred to, it's the latter sea. It's the one to the west. If someone's being followed, ahar. If they are lagging or lacking behind, they are ahar. He's using that term. He's saying, you won't have to yourself, and then he uses the term alayim. He's not referring to himself. He's referring to something or someone else when he says alayim, aharim ol pani. Now, the ol pani is essentially, it's mechanically saying over my face or before my face, before me. That's why it's translated oftentimes before me. We'll see ol pani all the time if it's a geographical term. And it will be used if there is one particular National Geographic expression that directly borders another. It will say it is ol pani, and then it will give you the nation or the region that it lies before. So he says, before me. And the interesting thing is oftentimes when that term is used, because you can use various terms to demonstrate that something borders or is against or is across from something else. Ol pani typically happens to be used by someone when speaking from a perspective. So since most of the writers who were writing the early scriptures were writing it from the geographical region that became the kingdom of Judah, or the geographical region that became the kingdom of the house of Israel, they're going to be thinking of those regions from where they are geographically. So ol pani, if they would be speaking of a place and they would say another place was ol pani, this place, they wouldn't be talking about a place that was, let's just take, for example, if they were talking about the land of the Pelishtim, which are usually translated as Philistines. They were talking about the land of the Pelishtim. And if they said another land or another place or another region or anything lied before the land of the Philistines, as in, if they were in, let's just say they were in Bithal, which Bithal was a place that was one of the locations that was kind of nearly in between the kingdom, the geographical kingdom of Judah and the geographical kingdom of the house of Israel. Okay, so it's sort of centered. They're going to be thinking from their location outward. So if there was a place that, as the crow flies, would be closer to them than the land of the Pelishtim, then typically they would describe it as ol pani, because they could use other terms like negat, for instance, that it was across it. And again, there are a few other terms that could express that it was up against it or bordered it. They could use gabul for border, but they would say it was ol pani. So he is saying, you will not have them before me. They would come between you, from where you were at, and him. That's a very important spatial term. Aharim. Again, this has to do with lagging behind or after. In a general sense, if you don't define it any further, you would typically think of west, because that's where the sun goes, to the west. But in general, if you define it more, it would mean lagging, behind, lesser, beneath him. So he's not just telling us we can't have any aliyim before his face. He says you will not have any lesser, because everything's lesser than he is. Everything is lesser than he is. Any god that we could come up with, imagine, they're lesser than he is. And we've done that, and man has done lots and lots and lots of that. They are lesser. Any principality, and here's where we start to get into the heart of the matter. Any principality. Any lesser principality. So, sorry, got something in my throat. So, something that you're going to find when you start looking at the language as OBRY instead of Hebrew, and you start looking at, for instance, this word, aliyim, instead of Elohim, is that aliyim, the word that he uses as a descriptive title for himself, and that he is also using in verse 3 as a descriptive of others. You'll start finding when you stop associating it in this Elohim Masoretic term as aliyim, that it is simply a root that has been embellished. The root is al. Al, you will most often see, for anybody who attempts to read the Bible, at least in Hebrew, if not OBRY, and I now have 2 different versions published and at the OBRY Project website on the resources page that you can look at in OBRY. And you can search through them in OBRY if you use the OBRY list of Strongs that has the key codes on there. It also has highlighted all of the words that I have found that are occurring in some form or another as basic biglyph roots. And I'm hoping to eventually publish an exhaustive biglyph root list. It's just incomplete right now, and it's going to take a while to get it complete, I'm afraid. I am sorry for that. Anyone who has taken the time, they look at least the language, and let's say they look at what Hebrew, let's say digital versions are out there. If you get a Hebrew module on your eSword or whatever, you'll see this word al a lot, al, or I hate to use the terms aleph and lamed. And you'll notice that this is most often used for a directional, a preposition, towards. Now, it can often be used as these, and various forms of it. They tend to, depending on context, because context in OBRY is absolutely king. Context. But they are directional. This is directional. This word, no matter what form it takes, it is utterly directional. spatial and directional. And it means towards, more often than not, towards. So when you put that suffix on, and again, the context is king, that suffix will oftentimes augment. Many suffixes do, and some prefixes do. And I don't have the exact augmentation where I can articulate to you exactly how it augments, but you can see it if you study the occurrences enough of it when it's functioning as his title, and of it when it's functioning as a descriptive of, and here's the unpackaging, when it's functioning as the descriptive of either gods or principalities we have contrived. And that doesn't just have to be some, it doesn't just have to be some six-armed, goofy goddess. And it doesn't have to be some elaborate system of mythological characters at all for it to qualify as Aliyim. It has to be simply principalities that we have established that are, of course, lesser to him, and that we put before his face. They can all qualify as Aliyim. And that means, for one thing, that you need to be conscious of occurrences of Aliyim. And let not those people who would get you believing all kinds of things that aren't so fool you in their usage of it. Like, I'll take a prime example, like Michael Heiser and his Council of the Gods stuff, and Rob Skiba and his Gods stuff, which really parallels Heiser's. Okay? We see it in context frequently, where it is referring to a body of men, a constitution, a set of laws, anything that is a principality. A principality. Whether it be a socially agreed upon norm that all of the normies out there enforce through their bitter looks and their judgments and sometimes their violent acts, that is a principality, that is an Aliyim. Whether it be a body of judges who have no right to judge matters that they call law because they are not the laws of Aliyim. They're man's law. But if you choose not to put yourself under his laws and obey his laws, then yeah, you're going to be judged by them. You're going to put those Aliyim before him. So if you want your Constitution, and you just think it's Jim Dandy, just know you are putting Aliyim, Aharim, Ol Peni, or let's say Ol Penu because it's before his face. That's a foundational commandment. Aliyim absolutely does not have to be speaking specifically of him. In the right context, of course, it's speaking of him. And we have to determine by context. We can see that it's speaking of him when we read Genesis 1 by the context. We can see it's not speaking of him if, say, for instance, we read about when the men of Israel were drawn after these whorish women of Moab/Midian, that they went with them and partied with them and were serving their aliyim. Now, what does that mean? They were serving. Do you think that they had their gods in some form? Because you see, there's a difference in language between a god, a principality, and an idol. There's a completely distinct difference, by the way. They went and they were serving their principalities, their ways, their designs, their cultural norms, and not Yahweh. That's all you have to do to be serving another God, is behaving in a way contrary to his law. Whether it be serving a cultural norm, whether it be serving a body of laws contrived by men that are contrary to his. Because if there be a set of documents meant to govern and articulate the government and laws of the people, and the preamble does not start with, "We, the sons of Israel," in keeping with the covenant made with our fathers, to our God, Aliyim, Yahweh. Do now reestablish his laws, statutes, and judgment as our only body of laws, so that we and our posterity should never think to put any aliyim before him. Any preamble that starts out in any other way, I don't care how awesome it seems. It's another aliyim, and it is an acharim, lesser, lagging, lacking, behind. And it's not meet for anyone who claims to be one of his people, or claims to be one who chooses to serve him. You can't serve two gods. You can't serve two masters. You have to choose one or the other. And so right there you have a 2 hour and 24-minute explanation as to why I don't care. I don't care remotely if that guy gets back his old life. I don't want him to have it. Because his old life will do nothing but harm the life of my children. It will do nothing but to harm all existence, all of creation. And yes, in a selfish way, it will only harm myself. It will only harm him, but he may be too ignorant to realize that. So, with that, I'll cut this episode off there, and there's just so much going on all the time, all around me, that I wish I could make more, but I usually can't. And for anyone who didn't see the posting I put up a few days ago, I do want to actually go over this. It's just going to take a minute just to explain what I'm doing. So for those who didn't see it, I put up a post linking to a subpage on the website. If you go to the OBRY project website and you float over what's now become sort of the universal menu, that those 3 or 4 horizontal lines. So what will come up down below is things like home and about and resources and donation. And folks, one thing is, if you read through those other pages, it's been a while since I've been able to edit those, rethink those. I don't always have very much time. It would be just terrific, like if somebody else was keeping up with the site and everything, because I just don't really have enough time. But under donations, you'll see a subpage that is sponsor a reading. Now, the whole purpose of that, and I wrote a very brief article and description of how it works on that page, so it'll explain it to you. The purpose of it is it's sort of a win-win kind of thing. For those of you who would like to see more literature that simply does not have a chance to get out there in audiobook form, I have priced reading any book. And, it will not be like the sort of podcast episodes I do where if I cough, I'm not stopping and rewinding and Control-K'ing and deleting that and starting again. Now, there are some people who produce podcasts, whatnot, that are that polished. I don't have the time for all of that. Okay, you get my coughing and you get all of those other things in this. Okay, because it's just not that important to cut all of that out, unless you're trying to make whatever you're producing so commercial and so polished. And if you are, and you're independent, and you're just a genuine person, and you want to produce the best possible product, then good for you. Sincerely. Okay? But this is not my mainstay. This is just something I do almost as a pressure release, you see. Okay? So the readings, they will be polished readings. The audio will be very good. It will be very consistent. There will not be the, coughing, uhs, or anything. There will be no commentary. There will be the reading. And it will be well read. And thus easy to listen to. In fact, oftentimes enthralling to listen to, because I do my best to get into the reading as much as possible. So the way that I priced it is by the words. Now, the base price is $175, and that is essentially anything that is about 21,000 words or less. Because there's a certain time that has to be put into it as far as the setup, the recording, even if I did it from start to finish perfect, there would still be things that I would have to do. Okay? And no audio recording that I do, like when I do a reading or anything, it never comes off perfect like that. It just never does. And there's always editing that has to be done on the fly. And then, of course, there's editing that has to be done afterwards. You have to put all of the segments together. You have to edit them consistently together. Noise reduction has to be done consistently altogether. Amplification has to be done consistently altogether. A lot of times with Audacity, because things can change. You know, the thing is, I have my microphone at my desk, and I have a 5-year-old. And I have other children that come over to spend time with my 5-year-old. And sometimes they get to my microphone and they change settings. And I don't realize that. And things then have to be adjusted. So unfortunately, in the editing process in Audacity, it's not just a settled science. And there's a lot of different things to it. So all of those things have to be done, you see. So even up to 21,000 words at $175 is still a very good price, because all of the time that I know has to be put into it, plus a graphic will have to be made for it. And anything exceeding 3 hours will have to be released in episodes. It's going to have to be cut apart. And then it's going to have to be published. Now, it can be published on at least one of my social media outlets, but let's just say, like, for instance, the Myth of German Villainy, I don't know if it was then YouTube's algorithms that picked up on a lot of the words that were being said a lot, because that last episode was that last reading of the Myth of German Villainy. Benton Bradbury went to great lengths to describe all of the nasty stuff done by Jews specifically to Germans after World War II had come to a close. So maybe YouTube picked up on those algorithms, and it would not let me publish episode 8 because of that. I had to publish it on BitChute and then let everybody know on YouTube that that's where it had been published. So that kind of thing can happen. However, I'm not going to just leave it to chance like that, because that kind of thing can happen. So I'll also, when I complete one of these readings, make an entry, whether it's one reading that's 21,000 words or less, or whether it's a very long reading that's 200,000 words and done in a number of 1.5 to 2 hour segments. They'll be listed, entered into their own page at archive.org. So they will be publicly available. And for anybody who hasn't listened to audiobooks, audios that are available on archive.org, it's a very good place to go and listen to audio. Because unless your browser is just doesn't like the software being used on archive, and they don't want to play nice, and your browser is going to close down the audio after 20 seconds, if that happens, you usually can get a plugin or use a different browser, and then that's not going to happen. So in general, archive.org is a pretty good place to listen to those audios. I have to have it in segments that are small enough to reasonably upload. Now, I will try when I can to put any of this together in one audio. But here's the problem. You're streaming these things. Now, some people download, and that's great. And most people that download have enough technical savvy to where they can download all the segments, tape them all together, and boom, they've got one file. It's not that hard. There's software that'll do it for you. So it's just far easier to put those in those smaller blocks, those smaller segments, because of the size, and just upload them like that. So it will be uploaded. So the way that it works is I put up, I don't know, maybe a dozen titles, which you can look into. Most of those titles that I listed there, you could find on Archive. Archive's a fantastic resource. And you can basically see what they're all about. I haven't yet read all of those titles. I have read through them enough to get a very good idea of what they are all about. and whether they are quality or not, and have substance that is important, and substance that you are not going to even get a hint of anywhere else. And that's one of the most important and beneficial features of sponsoring a reading. Now, I also said on there, if you had a book that you really wanted to hear read, that's fine. But not if the subject matter is very disagreeable to me. So you're going to have to let me know. You can contact me through, there's an email, the website, OBRY Project, or it's john@obryproject.info. You can email me and you can suggest the title to me. But I'm going to have to be able to look at it. So hopefully there's at least excerpts of it available at Amazon or Google Books or something. You'll have to send me the link so I can check it out and see if, okay, it's not so disagreeable. And I don't mean just disagreeable in the sense of, like, for instance, when I read Freemasonry and Judaism, Secret Powers Behind the Revolution, I did one segment of that where I did my own preface before I started reading, because the author's continued reference of the Jews as the Hebrews and the Israelites was so anathema to me, I had to clarify. Now, if you're going to sponsor a book or a reading, and that author is of the same mind, I'm not going to be putting in any kind of preference there. I'm simply going to do the reading. And I probably am not going to say, well, I just can't. It would have to be something that its core thesis was very much against what I hold to be true and good, you see. And again, it's going to go by words. So I have to figure out, okay, about how many words are in this, and this is going to be the price. The general rule is, and this includes the time that it takes to edit and make the graphic and publish, because sometimes it's going to be published, if it's published on YouTube, it's going to have a graphic, so it's going to have to be published as a WMP, I think. And if it, say, just goes to archive, then it's just an MP4. But I will have to make the graphic. I will have to do some editing. I will have to upload. So all of those things together, it just averages out to about 45 an hour. And that's not set in stone, because if I don't read these things well, or if it has a lot of names in it that are foreign, that are hard to pronounce, I'm going to have to do that right. There could be a lot of stopping, rewinding, starting, that kind of thing. It's just a basic average. And it's not me making money hand over fist whatsoever. Okay? Because that, for instance, that rate right there is like the friends and family rate that I charge just as a contractor. That's not me making much of a profit whatsoever, if any. Okay? So I tried to make this as affordable as possible so that we could get more audios out there that are good and that are important. Because not that many people are doing it. There's a lot of people out there that have the ability to read and have the ability to speak and can get audacity, because now I forgot what it's called. It's free. You're not stealing it. It's free. I just forgot what it's called. And they could do that. They could be doing their part by reading these hard-to-get books, these controversial books. They could be doing their part, and they're not. And most people aren't. Most people aren't doing their part at all. So, here I am. I'm offering away. Now, this will actually help because, for instance, let's just say, it just got to the point where I was doing that so much that I was able to actually put more time into doing the research that I do in OBRY and the research that I have to do for my book. And the research I have to do for my book is extensive. It's wildly extensive. So this was just kind of a win-win thing. You get an actual product So you're not necessarily just donating. You're buying something. You're buying something very, very good and very useful. You're making a donation to the world. If you sponsor a reading of a good piece of literature, a needed piece of literature, you're making a donation to the truth. So it's a very good thing. And I wanted to bring it up so that anybody who didn't see that post is quite aware of it. And I will probably keep bringing it up so that people can stay aware of it, because I think it's a brilliant, excellent thing for us to have more of that kind of literature. Because it's not about being illiterate. Well, people should read more books. Certainly people should read more books. The problem is a lot of books are only easily available in electronic form. And this, again, isn't thievery, because everything, especially published in the U.S. before 1923, is public domain. You're not stealing anything by going and getting the digital copies of it. But, not all of us have the kind of budget to buy in hard copy form, whether it be soft or hardback, a lot of these books. So this is a good thing. It's a good thing. And it will only go towards advancing the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Yahweh, which was absolutely meant to be here. So I'll leave you with that. And see you next time. All right?